In the half-dark of his own mansion, Henry Caldwell, a billionaire used to barking orders in glass boardrooms, was crouched under a table with his eyes wide and his breath locked in his chest, because for the first time in decades, he had no power at all in that room. Pressed up against his shoulder was Lena Hart, the newly hired maid, one yellow glove over the millionaire's mouth as she whispered, barely moving her lips, "Don't make a sound. Not now." Out in the hallway, footsteps crossed the corridor and low voices, way too intimate to be just guests, drifted toward the door like the house already belonged to someone else. The strange thing was, Henry wasn't trembling because he thought he was going to die. He was shaking because he'd just seen something his money would never be able to unsee. And while Lena held him there frozen, there was one detail in that moment, in what lay open on the desk, in what those voices were saying outside. That changed everything and could destroy his name in minutes. Before we go on, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? City, state, or country? Henry Caldwell, founder of a giant investment conglomerate, didn't look fragile, at least not on the outside. At 69, he still walked through his mansion in Chicago's upscale Gold Coast like every wall had been raised by his own hands. But that night, standing in the hallway near the library, he gripped the banister with a damp hand, like his own body was trying to warn him. Something's wrong. The house was too quiet. Not the kind of silence that feels like peace, but the kind that feels like threat. On the other side of a half-open door, his son Nathan Caldwell spoke in a low voice, but with a cruel urgency. And Nathan's wife, Brooke Caldwell, answered with the easy calm of someone who'd already made up her mind. "We handle it with the doctor, with the judge, with the report, and that's it. He signs, or we sign for him," she said, like she was talking about swapping out a couch. Nathan let out an irritated sigh. "He's confused. That's easy to prove." Henry's stomach turned. This wasn't a family argument. It was a plan. A full script to declare him incompetent, to rip away his company, his name, his control, even his dignity. Behind a cleaning cart, the newly hired maid, Lena Hart, had stopped by accident. She wasn't snooping. She'd just gone to restock towels and heard the wrong piece of conversation at the wrong time. When she realized what it was, she held her breath, as if any sound might give her away. Then she saw Henry in the hallway, standing there pale, looking like he'd been punched without anyone touching him. Lena set the cloth down slowly, walked over, and whispered without really moving her mouth, "Sir, don't make a sound. They're setting you up. Come with me." If you like stories that show the human side behind money and power, hit subscribe and stay. Some truths only appear when the mask falls. Henry tried to speak, but his throat locked. It was Lena who took his hand and pulled, firm, like she was saying, "This is survival now." She tipped her chin toward the camera in the hallway ceiling and breathed. There are eyes everywhere. He understood instantly. If they realized he'd heard them, their plan could turn into a prison right there, in his own home. And in that instant, with his house turning into enemy territory, Henry took his first step without looking back. To get out, he'd have to trust the one person in that mansion who owed him nothing at all, and escape before Nathan and Brooke noticed that the confused old man was wide awake. Lena Hart didn't lead Henry Caldwell through the front door. She knew the mansion better than the people who owned it, because she was the one who walked the paths no one else noticed. Service corridors, narrow back stairs, the exit through the laundry room. Henry stumbled over his own pride, heart pounding too loud for a man who'd always had everything under control. "Breathe shallow, and don't look back," she murmured, keeping her body between him and the cameras, like just the way he walked could expose that something had changed. Outside, the cold Chicago air hit his face like a slap of reality. The driver was gone. His car was gone. Of course it was. Lena pointed to an old sedan parked 2 blocks away, the kind of car nobody looks at twice. When Henry got in, The seat creaked under the weight of his expensive overcoat, and he stared at her like he was still waiting for the punchline to some elaborate joke. "Why are you doing this?" he finally managed. Lena didn't answer right away. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel and said, "Because I heard. And because I've seen people lose everything by trusting the wrong family." Her house was in a modest neighborhood on the north side, far from guarded gates and men in suits. It was small, with a narrow staircase and the smell of soup in the air. Inside, her mother, Gloria Hart, a woman with a blunt voice and tired eyes, appeared in the hallway with a folded blanket over her arm without even asking, "Who is this?" She took one look at Henry's face, saw the disguised tremor in his hand, and simply said, "Come in. First, we warm you up. Then we talk." Henry, who'd eaten with politicians and signed million-dollar deals, had no comeback for an order that simple. There was no flattery, no fear, just humanity. Sitting on a worn-out couch with a mug of hot tea in his hands, Henry realized something that hurt more than the betrayal. Here, in this cramped little house, he felt safer than in his own mansion. Lena moved around the kitchen like life was about fixing whatever you can fix right now without drama. Gloria pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "So, who's trying to knock you down?" she asked, like she was talking about a troublesome neighbor. Henry swallowed hard. For the first time in a long time, someone was speaking to him as a man, not as a last name. But as the warmth came back to his body, a question started gnawing at him from the inside. If Nathan and Brooke had planned this with such calm, how long had they been preparing to strike? And worse, who else, inside the company, was already on their side? Henry gripped the mug tighter, and Lena noticed the way his eyes went distant, calculating risk. "We're not safe yet," she said quietly. "If you want to fight back, you're going to need proof. And I know where to start." Henry Caldwell barely slept on Lena Hart's couch. His body was there, but his head was still in the mansion, replaying every word he'd heard behind that door. When he opened his eyes, the low ceiling felt wrong for a man who always woke up in oversized bedrooms, and somehow that gave him a kind of shame. In the kitchen, Lena's mother, Gloria, stirred a pot like nothing in the world was more important than getting a hot meal on the table. "You're going to eat," she declared, setting a plate in front of him. Henry watched the steam rise and realized something. It had been a long time since anyone told him what to do out of care. Lena sat at the other end of the table and switched her phone to airplane mode, like that little gesture was a silent prayer. "Running isn't the only problem," she said. "If you disappear, they paint you as incompetent. They'll take over the company, freeze your accounts, and lock you away somewhere nice with fake smiles." Henry tried to deny it, but the word report was still echoing in his head. Lena pulled an old notebook and started scribbling times, names, places inside the mansion. "We need proof, paper, audio, anything. Proof they planned this before you suddenly got confused." Henry stayed quiet, staring at his own hands. He'd spent a lifetime signing documents without reading every line, because he trusted the right people, or thought he did. "I have cameras in the house, recordings," he muttered, like he'd just remembered a forgotten safe. Lena's head snapped up. "Good, but the question is, who has access now?" The answer didn't come, because he already knew. If Nathan and Brooke were this relaxed, someone on the inside was already helping them wipe their tracks. A sharp knock at the door cut through the house like a crack of thunder. Gloria went to answer, and her voice changed, surprised and suspicious. "Who are you, kid?" A tall teenager stepped into the room with a backpack on his shoulder, cheeks red from the cold, gripping his phone with a shaking hand. Before he said his name, he locked eyes with Henry, like he needed to make sure he wasn't too late. It was Evan Caldwell, Henry's grandson, the only one in the family who still visited without asking for anything. I saw weird messages in the group. My dad told everyone to delete things." I knew something was wrong. Henry stood slowly, like his body had doubled in weight. Evan came closer and spoke fast and low, as if afraid of being right. Grandpa, they're saying you disappeared because you're not in your right mind, and they're filing paperwork today. Lena and Gloria traded a quick look that said, without words, this just got serious. Evan opened his phone and showed them screenshots of chats, a short audio clip of Nathan talking about signing for him. It wasn't the full proof, but it was the first brick. Lena took the phone carefully, like it was glass, and said, "So you didn't just come to find your grandpa. You came to help save him." She backed everything up on the spot. Cloud storage, copies sent to an email, notes marking what needed to be confirmed. For the first time since the night before, Henry felt something that wasn't only fear, it was focus. He looked at Evan and saw a kind of courage he'd forgotten existed in his own bloodline. But Lena threw cold water on the moment. This still doesn't knock them down. We need someone who knows how to hit back without leaving gaps. Someone who knows your documents, your contracts, and can't be bought. Henry drew in a breath, like the name had been trapped in his chest for years, and finally let it out. There is a lawyer, an old one, the only man I'd trust with this. At that exact moment, Lena's phone buzzed on the counter, and an unknown number flashed on the screen, insistent, like someone had already sniffed out their hiding place. That unknown number on Lena Hart's phone wasn't just a call. It rang too many times to be a mistake. She let it ring out, stared at Henry Caldwell, and said softly, "They're looking." The back of Henry's neck went cold. The little house that had felt like a shelter 10 minutes earlier suddenly seemed fragile again. That S when he made a decision that hurt his pride. He couldn't react as a father anymore. He had to react as an owner. He asked for a piece of paper, wrote down a name and an address, and said, "If this man is still on my side, we turn this around today." The old lawyer wasn't just any attorney. He was Harold Bennett, the one who'd stood by Henry through the worst contracts and the biggest wins, and who had quietly drifted out of the family's daily life precisely because he refused to play the flattery game. When he answered the call, his voice was dry and professional. Henry took a breath, like swallowing glass. "Harold, they're trying to have me declared incompetent." On the other end, a short, heavy silence. "Where are you?" Harold asked, his tone changing immediately. Lena gave him the address, and less than an hour later, a discreet car pulled up on the street. Harold stepped inside, looked Henry over from head to toe, and didn't ask, "What happened?" He asked, "Do you know exactly what you heard? Because if you do, we have to move before they sign anything in your name." At the kitchen table, the plan turned into ink. Harold took Evan Caldwell's phone, listened to the audio, scrolled through the screenshots, asked where each message came from. Evan spoke fast, nervous but steady. "It was in the family chat, and there was a message from my dad telling everyone to delete everything." Harold noted every detail, fingers already flying across his laptop, as if he were in court. "We refiling for an emergency order to block any guardianship attempt and freeze corporate changes until a full review," he explained, no sugarcoating. Henry looked at Lena and Gloria and felt a strange kind of shame. He owned a huge company, and he was asking for help at a small kitchen table with ordinary people as his only real support. When they left, Chicago felt even colder. Harold put Henry and Lena in a rideshare. No familiar driver, no company car, and told Evan to stay with Gloria, where it was safe. "If anyone asks, you haven't seen your grandfather," Harold warned, and Evan nodded with a tight, unhappy jaw, hating the lie but understanding why it was needed. The ride to the company headquarters felt longer than it had in years. Henry watched the streets pass and thought about the absurdity. He'd built an empire, and yet he could be erased with a fake report, a bought opinion, and a well-dressed son. Lena saw the way his hand dug into his knee and said quietly, You're not alone. But there's no room for self-pity right now. At the top of the building, the conference room was already staged. It was the kind of scene Henry knew by heart. Dark suits, expensive coffee, practiced smiles. Only this time, he walked in like a man who'd come back from his own funeral. Nathan Caldwell froze for half a second when he saw his father alive, lucid, and flanked by Harold. Brooke tried to keep her composure, but her eyes went straight to the lawyer, like she recognized an old enemy. Harold didn't shout. He didn't perform. He simply laid the documents on the table and said, "Any document signed in his name since yesterday is under challenge. And any guardianship attempt without an independent evaluation will become both a crime and a civil case." The air in the room shifted. This was no longer a family talk. It was evidence versus evidence. Then came the part no one in that room expected. A security officer stepped in, leaned toward Harold, and whispered something in his ear. Harold nodded once, turned to Henry, and said in a tone that cut through everything, "Your son tried to buy an international ticket this morning, using paperwork that stated you were already incapacitated and under family control." Nathan exploded. "That's a lie. Too loud, too fast." Brooke tried to jump in. "He's confused. Look at him." But Henry raised his hand, a small gesture, so firm the whole room fell silent. "I heard you," Henry said, without raising his voice. "I heard what you planned. If this part twisted your chest in a strange way, tell me in the comments what shocked you more. How cold the plan was, or the fact that it was happening inside his own family." Minutes later, the sound of footsteps in the hallway and the arrival of agents ended the theater. Nathan went pale, tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. For the first time, Brooke's mask cracked, not in sadness, but in raw shock. Henry watched his son being led away and felt something hard to admit. It wasn't only anger. It was grief. Grief for the son he thought he had. When Harold leaned over and asked quietly, "What do you want to do now?" Henry took a moment. Then he answered with a calm that almost seemed to hurt. "He's out. Of the company. And of my life." But when the door finally closed and the silence stayed behind, Henry looked at Lena and realized that winning was only half the battle. Because the question that remained was brutal. If his own house had turned into a trap, where exactly was he supposed to rebuild his life from here? When Henry Caldwell walked out of the building that night, the Chicago wind felt different. Not because the city had changed, but because he had. The car pulled up in front of Gloria Hart's modest house, and for the first time, he walked in without feeling like he was imposing. He walked in as a man who just lost a piece of himself and was trying to understand what was left. Gloria was still awake, sitting in the living room with the TV low, like she'd stayed up just to make sure he came back in one piece. She took one look at him and didn't ask about the case or the money. She just said, "You hungry?" Because tired people think crooked. Henry sat down and let his body sink into the worn-out couch. Lena brought him a glass of water and stayed standing, waiting for the right moment to speak. Right there, in that simple room, he realized how loud his mansion was on the inside, full of people, but empty of care. Evan came out of the bedroom with his phone in hand, looking older than he should. "They're posting stuff," he warned, showing headlines and comments. "Billionaire disappears. Family seeks guardianship. Crisis at Caldwell Group." Henry felt his blood boil, but Harold had already warned him. You don't beat a story by shouting. You beat it with the right actions fast. The next day, still in that same marathon of tension, Harold set everything in motion without turning it into a circus. Meetings with the board, freezing suspicious movements, internal audits, access changes, people being quietly pushed aside. Henry watched it all like a man seeing his own life being rebuilt piece by piece. And the strangest part, the person helping him the most wasn't an executive or a relative or a party friend. It was Lena with a notebook in her hand, jotting down what was missing, recalling names, times, small details no one in upper management would ever notice. She had seen, heard, and felt all of it, and now she was fitting the pieces together with frightening accuracy. Henry started asking Lena to sit in on decisions, not out of gratitude, but because she had something the rest of the room didn't: loyalty without an agenda. In a smaller meeting, when a director tried a syrupy speech about how the family was worried, Lena just lowered her head and whispered, "He's playing dumb." Henry looked at the man and got the message without another word. That's how he began cleaning house with a brand new filter. It was no longer about who smiled the nicest. It was about who stayed when the floor shook. Then came the move that took everyone by surprise. Henry asked Harold to formalize an internal change. Lena Hart would be named acting administrative coordinator with access to critical routines. Harold raised an eyebrow, not in disagreement, but fully aware of the bomb that would drop. People will push back, he warned. Henry didn't even flinch. Let them. When Lena heard, her face flushed, eyes filling with tears, and she shook her head like it was too big for her. "I don't have some fancy degree for this," she murmured. Henry answered low and steady, "You have character, and today, that's worth more than a pretty resume." That same night, Gloria served dinner like it was a ritual of healing. Evan pushed his food around for a while, before finally saying something that hurt and healed at the same time. "I thought I didn't have real family anymore." Henry looked at his grandson and understood that in the middle of all of this wreckage, something rare was taking shape. A kind of family that didn't come from blood alone, but from choice. Just as they were finally breathing a little easier, Harold's phone buzzed with a short notification, and his face hardened. "Henry," he said, looking him straight in the eye, "there are people inside the company who are still on your son's side, and they're not going to stop just because he's been removed." Henry stood in the middle of Gloria Hart's living room, like he could hear his own heartbeat in the walls. Learning that people inside the company were still aligned with Nathan wasn't just irritating, it was dangerous. Because when a coup fails, Plan B is usually to torch reputations, hide documents, and create chaos. Harold left his laptop open on the table and spoke without drama. "They can try to vote you out for instability. They can try to block your signature. They can try to turn employees against you." Henry rubbed his face, exhausted, and answered with something no one expected to hear from him. "And we're not just defending ourselves. We're going to change how this whole thing works." Lena refused to let him drift off into pride. She pulled up a chair, sat beside him, and started listing everything she'd seen in the mansion and the company. Names tied to access internal doors. People who always seemed a little too well informed in the hallway. Harold turned that raw information into action. Revoking permissions, changing passwords, freezing authorizations, bringing in an external audit that very night. Henry watched and looked like he was swallowing a bitter truth. He'd built an empire so big that at some point he stopped seeing its hallways. "I let it go on autopilot," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lena, calm and clear, simply said, "Autopilot is what leaves room for the wrong people." Later that night, Harold put a call on speaker and connected Henry with two senior members of the board. Henry didn't give a speech. He didn't beg. He spoke like a man who finally understood the price of outsourcing trust. "No one is going to use my name as a weapon. From today on, anything that touches control and signatures goes through double verification and full record keeping. Anyone who can't handle transparency is out." On the other end, there was silence. Not respect, shock. They were used to a Henry who did everything alone and fast, not one ready to rewrite rules, even if it bothered powerful people. When the call ended, Henry stared at his phone like it was an alien object. Messages from employees flooded the screen, some worried, some curious, some clearly fishing for information. He opened his notes app and wrote a short direct message, as if he were talking to the whole company without filters. He was fine, no guardianship had been accepted, and there would be a full investigation into internal conduct. Harold read it and nodded. Lena added one simple line. Tell them no one will be punished for telling the truth. Henry looked at her for a long second, and you could see it. He was learning a new kind of authority, one that didn't lean on fear. Then came the part of legacy that wasn't for pictures, it was for scars. Henry asked Harold to open a new document, an immediate fund with strict rules for scholarships and support for vulnerable seniors. Not someday, not when we get around to it, but starting now with real numbers and external oversight. Gloria, who'd been quietly listening from the side, let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. All this just because they betrayed you? Henry turned his head, and his answer came out low and raw. No. All this because I finally saw how blind I've been. I had enough money to buy anything, and I still didn't see what was happening in my own house. Evan scooted his chair closer and asked to be involved. Henry didn't treat him like a kid. He treated him like someone who'd held the line when the adults failed. You're going to help me oversee this, Henry said, pointing at the draft. Evan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of it, and nodded. Lena noticed the shift and said something that flipped a switch in the room. If this stays only on paper, it turns into a pretty promise. We need routine. That's when Henry made another move that quietly changed the game. He asked Harold to prepare Lena's formal appointment as administrative director, with real authority, not a thank you title. Lena tried to pull back, but Henry cut in with calm certainty. You're the first person in years who protected me without wanting anything. I need someone like that by my side. And so does this company. Later that night, when the house grew quiet and exhaustion finally started to catch up, Henry spent a moment alone at the window, looking out at the modest neighborhood that had saved his life. It wasn't romanticizing, it was a hard reset. He thought of the mansion, his son, his daughter-in-law, and how easily it all could have ended with him, locked in some fancy room while someone said, "It's for your own good." Then he walked back into the living room, looked at Harold, Lena, Gloria, and Evan, and said one simple sentence, the hardest one. I want to do this right, before it's too late. And in that moment, with everything set in motion and the wound still open, Henry asked Harold for one last favor, something private, personal, that had nothing to do with the company, and everything to do with what he'd lost by trusting the wrong blood. Later that night, when Gloria Hart's house finally went still, Henry Caldwell sat on the edge of the couch with his jacket open and his eyes fixed on nothing. The glow of the mansion, the meetings, the suits, all of it felt far away, like it had happened to somebody else. On the coffee table, Lena's yellow glove lay there, folded carelessly, and Henry stared at it like a reminder. The man who used to buy solutions had been saved by a small, almost invisible act. He drew a deep breath, looked at Lena, and spoke softly. No armor left. I spent my life surrounded by people, and tonight I'm only alive because someone I barely knew decided to stand next to me. Lena didn't make a speech. She just nodded, eyes shining, and turned her face away, not wanting to become anyone's hero. Harold shut his laptop, gathered the documents and said, "The worst is over, but you need to remember this tomorrow." Henry met the lawyer, gaze, and answered with a tone that wasn't anger, it was clarity. "I will. And I'm going to change what needs changing, even if it bothers half the people in that building." Evan stayed quiet for a long moment, then finally whispered, "I thought money was what held a family together, but it was her." He tilted his chin toward Lena. Henry swallowed hard because it hurt, and because it was true. Before leaving, Harold asked Henry to sign one more document, not for the company, but for protection. A clear order of restriction, legal boundaries, and a formal record of what had been done against him. Henry signed without his hand shaking. When he was done, he stood, hesitated for half a second, and instead of slipping back into the role of untouchable billionaire, he pulled Evan into a short, strong hug, the kind that says, "I'm sorry," without needing the word. Then he turned to Gloria and thanked her as a man, not as a last name. The night hadn't turned magical, but it had turned honest. "And now I want to ask you, what would you do in Henry's place? Would you cut your son off completely? Or try to fix things out of guilt? And if you were Lena, would you have stepped in, knowing the risk? Tell me in the comments which part hit you hardest, the betrayal, or the moment he realized who was truly on his side. And if this story held you and made you think, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories.